Welcome to An Incomplete History.
I'm Hillary,
And I'm Jeff.
and we're your hosts for this weekly history podcast.
So in the last episode, I did a little bit of a deep dive into the whole rationale for why I was making the software choices I was making. That idea of free and open source software being critical, the idea of privacy and security in your software, your applications you use, and the idea of cross-platform compatibility. These three key tenets are really kind of why I've picked these products, why I like them. They do what I need to do. They do them well. And we had talked about a browser. We talked about an email client. Now I want to talk about applications that, as I said in the last video, really will help you through well over 90% of most of the stuff you're doing. So the first thing I want to talk about is LibreOffice. And it's libreoffice.org. That's where you go to get it. It will take you right to a download thing. You can also read about it. It talks about what it is. It also gives you ways to get involved in the project. You can donate money directly. You can donate your time, energy. It's open source software. You can dive right in and create your own fork of the software. There's a lot of things you can do with this. It is compatible with Microsoft Office. It's compatible with Apple's proprietary titles, Pages, Numbers, and Keynote, if those are saved in like a Microsoft Office format. It cannot natively read Pages files, Numbers files, or Keynote files, but very few things can. So LibreOffice is great. If you click here, if you pick go download now, it gives you, the first option is always going to be the most recent release. Right now it's 6.4.5. It should populate your system, your operating system right here automatically. If it doesn't, you can pick it from the drop down and download. You can also kind of be a little more specific about what you download. And for those of you who are a little kind of not risk takers, but you kind of want the latest and greatest, there's this right here. You can go down there, and I'll kind of repeat that action. If you scroll down to the bottom of where it takes you when you click to download, and you go down here, you see available versions, and then you see pre-release versions. And if you click here, it will take me automatically to be able to download version 7's pre-release version. And it's actually moved from pre-release to release candidate. And it's very few bugs in it. Nothing I've done so far has been an issue. There are some substantial improvements in it. But you can get this, run it fine. It runs perfectly. Once you've installed it, it's going to ask you some questions and you're going to install it. And when you load LibreOffice, this is basically what you're going to get. And now I've used it, so I've got my recent documents are all listed here. But it's easy to kind of read what I need to read, and it's got pretty robust help. It also can get you to forums where you can ask people. It's got a very active community of people engaged in the project, so there's people on there who can really help you. They've got a pretty active Reddit thread as well if you want to post on there. But your most used applications are going to be Writer, and this is where you'll bring in Word documents. And Writer, you can look at it. It's a pretty standard word processing software here, but you can do page layout in it as well. And then if you click up here, if you go up here, and you can pick new. You don't have to go back to some kind of main menu to pick the next thing. So say I also wanted to create a spreadsheet. Let me just resize this to fit in here. And this is Excel. This is Libreoffice Calc, and it's basically Excel. And it works just like Excel. It's 100% compatible. No compatibility issues. I will say this for Writer. If you use WordArt in Microsoft Word or any of the Microsoft applications and you get kind of really fancy with it, there might be a little bit of an issue with it. But as far as formulas in Calc go, those are going to work fine. If you have grade books, if you have kind of essay rubrics, any of those things, they're going to work fine. So we've got Calc, we've got Writer, and then we've got Presentation, which is basically PowerPoint. And it is a presentation software. It reads PowerPoint slides beautifully. It can save out to those, right? All of these packages, all of these parts of LibreOffice can save back into Microsoft Office formats. So say you have a colleague you're working with and they insist on using Microsoft Office. That's not a problem. You can share documents back and forth. Now, it will not open Google Docs. However, Google Docs has a way for you to export stuff that it's compatible. But I mean, this is Impress, which is the LibreOffice version of PowerPoint. We've also got two that you may use occasionally. One is called Drawing, and if you've used Visio in the past, this is kind of the analog to Visio. It's pretty richly detailed flow charting and process and diagram creation software, fully integrated into the whole LibreOffice environment. And then you've got formulas. So if you are a stat or a stats professor or a mathematician, you're going to probably use something like this. If you're K through 12 and you're kind of doing math problems, this is a great way to get them in a way where students, it really does help them. And you can really customize those formulas and then paste them into docs or presentations or whatever. The last part of LibreOffice, the one I would say most people should probably shy away from until they're really comfortable, is called, totally blanking now. It is called Database. This is just called Database. And it's LibreOffice's version of Access or a relational database. So FileMaker, if you've ever used FileMaker, you've used a database. Most of us who work in higher ed have had to deal with databases, whether we know it or not. But sometimes databases do things that other things can't do. During my own research for my PhD, when I was researching and then writing my dissertation, I set up a database to manage sources and to manage notes and things, and it really did help. But it's complicated. The learning curve for database, just like the learning curve for Access and FileMaker, the learning curve is quite high. And so I would not suggest you do this initially. And if you've got kind of light data keeping needs, I honestly think a spreadsheet is a better first start. You can always move a database information data from a spreadsheet into a database. And, you know, if the most important thing is you getting the data into something, it might be better for you to use Calc for that. I might post a video later on, kind of an addendum series, where I talk about how to take that database application and make a simple database to manage information for research projects or something like that. So that's LibreOffice. Compatible across all the platforms I want to use. There's no native app in iOS on iPhones and iPads. However, there are a couple of free options that will read and write LibreOffice documents. They're independent. And I will link those in kind of the end notes to this video. Security, I mean, you control your data, right? This saves locally. You can also save it in a cloud storage system if you want. Be aware that if you use something like Google Drive or iCloud, you are putting it on somebody else's server. Are you relinquishing ownership a little too much at that point? I don't know. And it's free and open source, right? So it kind of ticks all our boxes for what we want in something like this. And it works beautifully with Microsoft Office. Now, 3 to 4 years ago, if you said that to me, I would have disagreed because it was very contentious sometimes in functionality, but it really has the last few versions, the last set of iterations. It's really kind of done a great job in being compatible. So that's the end of LibreOffice. And honestly, I mean, you can see, think of how much you use Microsoft Office or the Apple versions to do your work, your day-to-day work, probably most of it. The other apps I want to show you today, the first one is called Joplin, And it's an open source note-taking and to-do application. And it does a couple of things. First of all, it's free and open source. So right there, it ticks our first box. It's really focused on security and you owning your own information. You can save locally. You can save in your cloud service of choice. Or you can kind of put it on a zip drive and move it between systems manually. But it doesn't have its own proprietary storage system like Evernote, right? So think of Joplin as the free and open source alternative to Evernote. But what I really like about Joplin is it's a little bit more than that because it uses something called Markdown Language. And Markdown Language is pretty remarkable. You see right now, this is a note I have in Joplin, and it's just text, right? All it is ASCII text, and you're like, well, that's fine, but kind of plain looking. But it uses Markdown. So these little asterisks here, and this hyphen, and these square brackets, when I click to code view, which gives me kind of a WYSIWYG view of my document, you see what it looks like, right? And the idea is this. Sometimes you just need to take notes and you don't need to worry too much about how it looks on the page. You can deal with that later, preferably in your word processing software, right? And Joplin kind of gets out of the way when you need to do that. And its files, they save as MD files. It's basically a version of a text file. It's a text file with a little bit of information added to it, but you can open them in just a text viewer. And you can organize your files into kind of nested notebooks. You can see the other notes that are in that notebook, right? So here are some tables. And again, if I click code view, you can see what those tables would look like. There's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with this. It also comes with extensions usable in Chrome and Firefox that let you clip web pages into Joplin. You can actually see that because if I go back here and say I'm here on LibreOffice and you see this little icon up here, the little J, if I click on it, it's going to tell me what I want to clip. Do I want to clip the whole page, the HTML? It also gives me a choice of where to put it. I'm going to put it into Essentials. I want to clip a simplified page and notes successfully completed. And if I go back to Joplin now and I go here, here's my simplified page. And you notice I have the code view turned on. So it's just kind of showing it in a very raw format. The great thing is it actually shows me all those hyperlinks of where I may or may not want to go. But if I switch to code view, it's going to render it as HTML. And now it's simplified code view. So it does switch, kind of strip some things out. But it's really good for just kind of, if you're kind of scouring the internet looking for quick information, you can just keep putting stuff in a folder. I like to have a folder I call working, where it's stuff I'm actually working on that day. And at the end of the day, I like to take some time and look through the working folder and move notes out of that into other places. But Joplin's really great. It works beautifully on iOS devices, especially iPads. Fantastic in Linux. Works well in Apple, Mac OS devices as well. Linux, there's a bonus. You can actually use a terminal version if you really want to kind of feel old school. That can be a lot of fun. So we've got Joplin, ticks all our boxes for kind of what we want these software packages to do. And then the last one I want to talk about is an alternative to Adobe Acrobat, and it is called Okular. And Okular is created by the people who do K-desktop environment packages. Again, this is free and open source. And Okular, okular.kde.org, is where you would go to get this. And it's basically a PDF reader. And you can actually go to pdfreaders.org and find other open source PDF readers. But what I like about it is Okular is cross-platform. So I can get it for the platform I need. It comes for a lot of different flavors of Linux, but it comes for Windows and Mac OS as well. And let me open up Okular really quickly. And this is basically what Okular is. And what I can do is open up this, and this is a PDF. And now this is a pretty crappy PDF. The quality is not very good, but so many of us in academia use PDFs all the time. We need a way to access these things. And although most of our institutions give us free access to Adobe's applications, again, you're relinquishing a little bit of your control there. So something like Okular is a really good alternative to have. Now, Okular does not work on phones and iOS devices. So there's a little bit of a compatibility issue there, but those devices usually have built-in ways to deal with PDFs. So I'm not going to deal with that too much. But Okular works really well across your Mac machine, across your Windows machine, across your Linux boxes. So those are kind of 3 applications that I think will suffice for your content creation for over 90% of what you're doing in courses. So if you would use PowerPoint to create lecture slides, you're going to be using LibreOffice. If you kind of write your lectures in something like Word, you would be using LibreOffice as well. If you're using something like Evernote to do research and gather, data and material off the internet, you would use Joplin for that. And then to kind of read PDFs, whether it's from an online repository of articles or something like JSTOR or something else from your library, or scans you've taken of things you've looked at, you can use Okular to look at those. So I hope this are kind of some useful tips for you, things you can use in your own kind of daily life, getting used to the new reality, but also taking it as an opportunity to reevaluate, what do I use to do what in my profession? And am I relying on things that kind of infringe on my own ability to control my own kind of research, my own intellectual creations, my own way of engaging with students? And for students, I think this is great for you to use as well, because, free and open source promises exactly what it says, right? That it will always be free and it will always be open source. And legally, and you can go back to that web page that I showed in the video before this one, you can go back and read the legal decisions. Once something's under free and open source, it is under free and open source. So it's not like somebody could swoop in tomorrow and make, Okular suddenly put a paywall into it. Somebody else could just take it and fork it and make a new version, right? And again, you can always usually donate. A lot of the creators make it fairly easy, and you can even click and you say, well, why? Why should I donate? It's the easiest way to support, right? Donating money is the easiest way for you to support development of free and open source software solutions. Like I said before, if you're in academia, maybe there are other things you could donate as well, including your time and effort in certain things. You can become a supporting member. There's a lot of things you can do. So that's it for this episode. Next episode, I'm actually going to talk about how do you actually record content for online use by students, and what are some things that I've decided I like, and what are some things I've decided I really don't like. And can we find solutions that kind of match our criteria of free and open source, controlling your data and your privacy, and then cross-platform compatibility?